Folks, welcome back to So Bad It's Good, presented by Betches Media. You know how lately I've been talking about shows that kind of give you hope, that are life affirming? Well, you probably already know about this show, but if you don't, I want to tell you there is an amazing show on ABC that has just entered its 17th, you heard me right, 17th season called What Would You Do? And it reveals how people behave when they think no one is watching by using hidden cameras to record real reactions to thought provoking scenarios. It brings people together. This show, you get comedy, you get life affirmation, you deal with really pressing issues, and it is hosted by somebody that I feel I have grown up watching. This man has been with ABC News for close to 40 years. You have seen him on 2020, Nightline, Good Morning America, and now 17 seasons as the host of What Would You Do? This man has earned 7 Emmy Awards and a Peabody Award. The one and only John Quiñones. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing? Great to be here.
I'm doing better now that you're here. I mean, Mr. Quiñones, can you even imagine this kind of success for a show like this? I mean, it really is a juggernaut. 17 seasons in, you couldn't have predicted this.
No, not at all. I mean, I've been at ABC as a reporter. I started out covering Latin America because I speak Spanish. So my job was Nicaragua, El Salvador, with Peter Jennings and Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer and all the great people of ABC News. So I did straight, journalism, and this is still journalism. I just came up with the idea about 17 years ago to do something with hidden cameras that would shine a light on human behavior. It would be like a fly on the wall because these issues happen in real life, but they happen when, cameras aren't rolling. So that's the whole premise of the show. And it took off. It was part of 2020, one of the segments on 2020 initially. And we just filmed in diners in New Jersey. But now it's exploded all over the internet. The kids are doing their own What Would You Do TikToks.
Yes. You're like you're a TikTok celebrity right now, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you pull up John Quiñones' name on TikTok and it's everywhere. And it is this kind of interesting part of the show now. When you come out after it's revealed, people know immediately who you are. They're like, oh my gosh, it's you. Is that validating? What does that feel like? Because you're doing something really important, but also people are so genuinely excited that it's you.
It's very emotional, and there's a big sigh of relief. And part of the excitement is, that they're on the show and we're getting to meet. But it's also a relief that what they just witnessed wasn't real.
Yeah.
Thank God it wasn't real. So there's part of that. When I break the scene and I come out, people are really emotional. I mean, sometimes they're in tears. And in one of the scenarios we filmed at a car wash, it was about a racist guy yelling at Latino workers washing his car, saying they're not doing a good enough job of it. And the woman who stepped in for them, of course, is an immigrant herself. She's from the Dominican Republic. She used to wash cars. She's getting her car washed at the car wash. And she witnesses all of this. And she steps in and does gives them some beautiful advice and defends the immigrant. And when I came out, she just fell to her knees, crying and sobbing, saying, I love your show. I'm an immigrant myself. And I think what your show does is shines a light on these things that really do happen in real life, but they happen when cameras aren't rolling. So, it's always very special when I come out and people are just really emotional. And it just touches the heart because I know that what we're doing is good.
No, it is. We need this show now more than ever. I mean, those are the things that I feel is sometimes there is this lack of hope and this lack of understanding each other. And that's what this show does. Now, when you go into a 17th season or even seasons previous, how do you go about picking the topics that you're going to be covering for the next season?
We watch what's in the news. We watch the issues that are going viral on social media. And that's something we didn't have when we started doing the show initially. And of course, we listen to what the politicians are saying and promising and talking about. We want to know, what are everyday Americans really thinking, right? So we get the ideas from everywhere. For a while, we were holding a contest online where people send in ideas, and we got like 12,000 ideas. A lot of them were duplicates, but many of them we use in the show, and we flew the people to wherever we were filming their scenario. And it was great. So we just watch what's what's prevalent and what's hot as a topic. I think at a time, as you mentioned, when society is so divided, the show kind of reminds you that we're more alike as human beings than
Yeah.
different, right? I really sincerely believe that, and I believe that in our hearts we all want to do the right thing, but it's just that sometimes we're a little bit afraid to step in. And let's face it, sometimes it's dangerous to step in as a good Samaritan. How many times have you heard that the good Samaritan was injured themselves by trying to help? Fear can keep us from doing a lot of things, but it should never stop us from doing the right thing. And I think in the end, the quality of our lives and the health of our society and our communities and our families depends on how well we all treat each other in those little tiny minute interactions of our daily lives. And we got to just, I think it's really important that we all make an effort to ensure that that people who are different from us are felt like they're being heard, like they're being seen and respected. In the end, I think that's the ultimate gift you can give to someone, or in fact, give it to yourself. Yeah.
I mean, giving a voice to the voiceless. I mean, 17 seasons ago, when you started this, has there anything like that's really been surprising to you as the show goes on? Because you have this message that like fills me up with hope and stuff. But has there ever been times where you're like, oh man, this kind of wrecks my belief system at a certain point? Or has it always been very good natured and affirming for you?
No. There are times that during the day, and we'll be filming one scenario all day long from 8 in the morning till 6 at night. And there are days when no one steps in and does the right thing until the end. And then in every single one of our scenarios, and I got to tell you, this always happens. It's almost like it was meant to be, like the heavens sent someone down as a hero to speak up for the victim. Someone steps in, and it's often the person you would least expect, and they do the right thing, and they do it in such a beautiful way that it really does restore your faith in humanity. There was one scene where we were wondering what happens if you see a person collapse on the street. And we did it in Newark, New Jersey, by the train station. And at first we did it with a well-dressed businesswoman who's walking along, a stunt artist, right? She's a stunt actress, and she falls very convincingly. And when she collapses, a well-dressed businesswoman, people stepped in right away and helped her and called 911. But then I said, what if we switch actors? And instead of a well-dressed businesswoman, it's a homeless man who is disheveled, and he's 85 years old, and he's smelly, and he's dirty, and he's holding a beer can in his hand. What will people do then? So we found an actor in New York. There's all kinds of actors, right? We found an elderly actor who could play that role and who fell very convincingly. When it's a homeless man, as opposed to a well-dressed businesswoman, 88 people walked by, and no one would step in to help the homeless man. People are stepping over him. One lady made the sign of the cross and kept walking. And we were like ready to give up, saying, well, I guess if you're homeless, you're not going to get a lot of help. But then we heard the tapping of a walking cane on the sidewalk. And then into the frame of the hidden camera comes this beautiful African-American woman who's stumbling along with a cane because she has suffered a stroke. And guess what? She's homeless herself. And guess what? She stops to help. And she starts asking people going by, excuse me, does someone have a cell phone to call 911 for this man? 38 more people go by. No one is stopping. I remember she stooped down, and she didn't know he was an actor, of course, but she did something we didn't expect. She takes the beer can out of the actor's hands and stumbles over to the trash can and throws it away, as if she was thinking, maybe if people don't think he's a bum or an alcoholic, maybe then people will stop. It didn't work. 38 more people go by. She then made a fist to the heavens, and she was angry, and then finally stepped down again to the homeless man on the street. And she said to him, sir, I don't know your name, but I'm going to call you Billy. And she said, Billy, my name is Linda Hamilton, and don't you worry, my man, I'm homeless too, and I'm going to stay here until help arrives.
Oh my gosh.
Finally, a woman stops and calls 911. Those kind of moments are so inspiring,
Yeah, and it's also important, like, if 88 people are not stopping, all it takes is one to stop. And are you going to be that one? And
Yeah.
that's what it says. It puts that idea in your head and reminds us of being good Samaritans and loving our neighbor and all of these things that we were raised with. And it's so good to have a show that kind of reminds you of that. Now, this first episode, which you'll be able to watch, it's on ABC Monday nights, but it streams on Hulu the next day, and you can catch up on old episodes as well. What is this first? Because the first episode, we already have, will somebody let somebody know about a secret romantic affair being exposed? We have an underage teen who's pressured to buy an illegal vape, a rude customer berating an immigrant employee. I mean, this is a jam-packed first episode. What stands out to you?
Well, that one in particular that's the car wash episode where this woman who's from the Dominican Republic just broke down in tears saying, I was once that immigrant, and that's why I stepped in. And in every one of our scenarios, we find that time and again, the people who step in and try to get involved are people who themselves have been marginalized or criticized. If you're a gay person and you witness gay bashing, you will raise your voice usually. If you're an immigrant, a Latino who's been through some sort of, put downs and discrimination, you will raise your voice because you know what it's like. So that one is very special to me. We also have Sarah Haynes on the show from The View.
Yeah.
And she's doing one where an employer is taking applications and won't hire someone because of their weight. What will you do if the owner of this place says, I won't hire you because you're overweight? It's jam-packed with scenarios that we filmed all over the country. It really is the best and biggest season yet. We went to South Carolina, to Reno, Nevada, to St. Louis, Missouri, Boulder, Colorado, Boise, Idaho. And this time we're not filming just in diners in New Jersey, but we're going to airports and boats, golf courses and wineries, and we're tackling all kinds of issues. So I think that makes this season particularly special.
I always think when I'm watching this and you have the actors, portraying these really intense scenarios, like how are these actors worked with beforehand? Because obviously they have some improvisational training. I was watching an episode from, I forget which season, where it was something with gay bashing, and the actor felt so bad afterwards having to do this, because realized they were saying these kind of really inane, horrible things. How do you work with these actors going into these scenarios?
We have, big sessions before we start rolling. And if they don't feel like they're up to it, we don't hire them. But they're such great actors that they realize the importance. I mean, they're exhausted at the end of the day. It's a unique kind of acting because usually, as you know, actors feed off each other's lines. But in this case, we're telling that they're reacting to real people, and who the heck knows what real people are going to say to them. And then I'm talking to them in their ear.
He has a walkie-talkie, you guys, and he's talking right in their ear. He's like, say this, say this.
Just to keep it, to wrap it up a little bit, we have to be very careful not to go too far because we don't want anyone to, to get angry and to get too upset. And we do, by the way, have security right in the middle of the scene so that if I can't get out there quickly enough, they can raise their hand and say, no, stop, it's the show. But yeah, sometimes I'm talking to the actors and they don't want to say what I just told them to say. But it's their job. And in the end, they realize the value of having shined a light on it. And in the end, many of them are in tears. And I'll tell them, you're an actor, you knew this was not real. And they're like, yes, but it touched me so much.
I dare you guys watching these episodes. Sometimes you'll laugh and sometimes you actually will find yourself in tears and you won't even know. All of a sudden there's tears streaming down your face and you're like, oh my gosh. When you were growing up in San Antonio and then going to journalism school, I mean, how did that all come about? Where was the passion and the drive, and why did you want to get into this business that you've been so successful in? What was the initial impetus?
I grew up in poverty. I grew up in the barrio on the west side of San Antonio. My dad was the janitor. My mom used to clean houses on the rich part of town. I didn't speak a word of English when I went to the first grade. This, despite the fact that my family's been in Texas for generations. I mean, we've always lived there, but in San Antonio, where 60 to 70% of the population is Latino, you don't have to learn English because everyone speaks Spanish. And we've been there for generations, like 7 generations in Texas. I get a kick out of people saying, John Quiñones, you're Mexican American. When did you cross the border and come to the U.S.? It's like, we were always here. I didn't cross the border crossed us. And we were migrant farm workers. When I was 13, my dad was laid off from work. So we went to pick cherries in Michigan, in Northport, Michigan, the cherry capital of the world, where we would pick cherries for 75 cents a bucket. And I remember we would strap these buckets around our neck and teetering on the top of these ladders overlooking orchards of cherry trees. And it would take me 2 hours to fill that darn bucket for 75 cents. And then I'm telling you all the story to tell you what, that I kept my dream alive through all of that. And those experiences, by the way, when we would go shop, we would go on Sundays to the Goodwill store or go buy an ice cream, not working the fields that day. People would follow us around because we were dirty and we spoke with a funny accent. So a lot of the kernels for the ideas that I got for being a journalist, first of all, for giving a voice to people who don't have a voice, for doing a show like What Would You Do, came those ideas from my own experiences.
Yeah.
I wanted desperately to tell the world that we were worthy, that me, John Quiñones, could tell, even despite my little Mexican accent, could tell stories just as well as anyone else. And I knew also that there were heroes in my community that no one was reporting on. All you heard about my little community in San Antonio was that, there were drug dealers and crime and gangs, right? In the Latino community. No one talked about the heroes. And I knew there were heroes there. And I knew just the person who could tell those stories. And it was me. So I used to watch Geraldo Rivera on 2020.
Yeah.
And dream of being like Geraldo, the only Latino on network television. And my dream came true. But it wasn't easy. I mean, loans, scholarships, a program called Upward Bound that gave an opportunity to kids in the inner city. And I wound up getting a fellowship to study at Columbia University and get a master's in journalism. Then I worked in local TV. And the one story that got me to the network was a story I did on immigration, where I went undercover and I posed as a Mexican citizen trying to get into the U.S. Now, the fact that I look the way I do, and I was 26 years old and I speak Spanish, allowed me to go undercover and pretend that I was just another immigrant trying to swim across the Rio Grande. I found a coyote who, on hidden camera, he had no idea I was a reporter, sells me a fake birth certificate, a fake social security card. He puts me on an inner tube, and I floated across the Rio Grande, all captured on hidden camera, to show people what it's like to be an immigrant. What are the push factors that make someone leave their families in Latin America, to their wives, their children, their girlfriends, their mothers, to come get a job here as a roofer or a dishwasher for very little money? How desperate must it be? And that's the kind of story I wanted to do. And I did it. I swam across the Rio Grande, all captured on hidden camera.
Oh my
God. I got a
God.
job at a restaurant, posing as, and again, I'm just an immigrant who just arrived, speaking only Spanish. The value, again, of diversity, right? For this TV station in Chicago. And I worked at a restaurant where the owner of that restaurant had 7 Mexican undocumented workers working for him, and he had not paid them in 17 weeks. And every time they complained, he would say, hey, guys, you get to sleep here in the basement. You get to eat all the food you want. You keep complaining, I'll call immigration and have you deported. And by the way, that happens in America today. So I went there still undercover as a reporter for that Chicago station, and I got a job as a dishwasher. And by day, I'm washing dishes, and at night I slept with the other guys, and then I pulled out a little camera. And I'll never forget the shock in my fellow dishwashers' faces when they realized that I was a reporter. And in Spanish, I interviewed them, and through tears, they told me how they were being held against their will, really, in that restaurant.
Yeah.
But the next day I came back to work, and I remember I confronted the owner. Can you imagine how his mind was blown? The day before, I'm his dishwasher. And now I'm peppering him with questions in English with a camera crew behind me. It won an Emmy, that story.
Yeah, I mean, this is WBBM TV in Chicago. I believe you won 2 Emmy Awards in 1980 for this. And like, it just blows me away because it's like, this is what you're still doing. with
Yeah.
What Would You Do? It's like this kind of spin-off of what you initially, which I was re-watching the interview you did on The View, and I think
Yeah.
Anna Navarro was
Yeah.
thanking you for breaking that glass ceiling for
Uh,
people, because she says we didn't see a lot of us, and you were there, kind of this hope. And I just thought, how interesting. And is that something you are always so prideful of it? Does it ever feel like a burden, or is it something that you're like, I am so happy to be doing what I'm doing and inspiring other people to do
oh
what
yeah,
I do?
never a burden, never. And whether I like it or not, I know I am a role model because I was one of the first ones in Latinos in network television. Certainly, I was hired also because of that story. It won an Emmy and it brought me to the attention of ABC News. And my dream was to work with someone like Peter Jennings and Ted Koppel, and I got to do that. But no, to this day, I speak at universities. I speak to groups all the time. This weekend, I was down in South Texas, always hoping to inspire and motivate, because I know what it was like myself when I didn't have anyone who would listen to me and tell me, give me some advice about how to get into this business. So I love doing that. I wear that badge with pride.
Before we get back to the show, I was just curious. You brought up Peter Jennings and Ted Koppel and all of these amazing people. I mean, who was the person that really mentored you at ABC, or that when you got there, you really learned the most of? Because, I grew up watching ABC News. Who was the person, who were the people that really inspired you once you got to be a part of that family?
I love Barbara and Diane Sawyer. God, she was the anchor person on Primetime Live, the TV show with Sam Donaldson. But I think early on, when I was 27, 28 years old, when I came to the network based in Miami to cover the wars, because I speak Spanish, was Peter Jennings. I mean, first of all, he was just incredible. He was really so good. He could be on the air live. You might remember when 9/11 happened, he was on for like 72 hours. I don't know when he went to the bathroom. He was just so good at just keeping the world informed and doing it in such a beautiful way. I was really intimidated by him because he was the superb anchorman, and I was this young kid reporter. And I remember going to Central America, and one of the first stories I did in Nicaragua was to get an interview with the president of that country, Daniel Ortega, who, by the way, is still the president today in Nicaragua. But back then, he was a revolutionary activist, and he got voted in as president. And I got this exclusive interview with him. So I called Peter Jennings from Managua, Nicaragua, and I told him in New York, Peter, I've got this great interview. I was so excited. He said, fine, young man, I'll put you on. And then I hang up with Peter Jennings, and the president's office in Nicaragua calls canceling the interview. So now I got to call New York and tell them that the story I had promised wasn't going to happen. And I expected to be yelled at, fired, and Peter Jennings, I'm shaking in my boots down in Managua, Nicaragua. And Peter Jennings, instead of yelling at me, gave me some advice that I carry with me to this very day. He said, you know what, John, this is going to happen again in your career, where someone promises you something, but they don't deliver. He said, listen to me. Don't worry so much about talking to the movers and shakers of the world. Concentrate on talking to the moved and the shaken. In other words, talk to the campesinos. As a Latino, you can go into areas of Latin America where no one, even I, Peter Jennings, can't go. You speak the language, you understand the customs. You can give a voice to people who don't have a voice. The politicians, the leaders, presidents of countries, they can always call a press conference. They have people who issue these statements. You will do better if you talk to the real victims of war, the real victims of natural disasters. Do that and you'll be a better reporter. So I've always concentrated on talking not so much to the movers and shakers of the world, but to the moved and the shaken.
Wow, that's beautiful. I mean, and also, you've covered so many, like, the Chilean miners. I remember my teacher wheeling in a TV back in the day for the Challenger, which you were reporting live on scene at the Challenger explosion.
Wow.
I mean, you've been the witness of so many kind of historical events, and you are one of those trusted people. So when we see you on What Would You Do, we immediately go there with you because you've earned our trust through the years.
Yeah.
But seeing those, how do you remain calm in these situations? How do you remain like trying to get a message out to us?
You keep in mind the greater good. right? This might be uncomfortable for me. I covered Uvalde, the school shootings. ABC made a commitment to go down there and remain there for a year. We opened up an office. We just wrote a book called 1 Year in Uvalde. Me and Maria Elena Salinas, the anchor from Univision, and all the, the proceeds from the book are going to help the schools. But sitting in those interviews, you can imagine talking to the parents who lost those 19 children and 2 teachers in that mass shooting. It hurts you. You're often in tears yourself, but you keep in mind that the greater good is that by exposing this, by bringing this to millions of viewers across the country and now all over the internet, some good might come, some change might happen because of your reporting. So you kind of toughen up, and when you witness tragedy like that, you just keep in mind that the greater good will outdo the pain you're feeling in that particular moment.
Yeah. Wrapping up back with What Would You Do? I also want to let people know, if you haven't seen it, the show is it's so funny as well. I mean, just the reactions of there's such a great humor to this show. And I was wondering, what is the hardest you've laughed in these 17 years? Because I have to imagine there are certain reactions or certain things that you could never plan on. Is there one moment that sticks out in your mind?
We were doing a scenario at a pharmacy. What would you do if you hear the pharmacist yelling out every illness and every ailment that people waiting for their medicine had? So obviously the pharmacist was an actor, and the people he was disclosing their ailments about were actors. But he would go, Mr. Johnson, your hemorrhoid medicine is here. And Mr. Johnson, your Viagra is here. And the customers go, please don't say shh. And other customers would just say, quiet down, don't say, you're not supposed to say that. HEPA rules, right? I was dying laughing behind. And this season, by the way, we will now do What Would Children Do? We're doing a first about what would kids do, and they are just hilarious because they're so pure and innocent. And I got to tell you, we did a couple of scenarios that will be in this new season, What Would Kids Do, where we have 8, 9, 10-year-old actors pretend that they're lost or pretend that they're being bullied. What advice will they have to children when their parents are not around? By the way, we told the parents to step aside and hide out with me. And what those kids said, I tell you, they can teach us valuable lessons as adults about right and wrong. And I was laughing with some of their reactions too. So it can be fun too. It's not all so serious.
No, that's right. It's such a great blend. So I highly recommend this show. I was just watching the finale of last season, and there was a young adult, this girl that there was an abuse scenario potentially by a parent to a child that was putting hot sauce on the child's tongue. And this girl had to have been like 13, 14 years old, actually stood up for the kid. And I just thought I was like, would I have done that? That's the thing. You always would I have done that? Would I have the courage to stand up in these scenarios for what is right? And when they do, it is such a beautiful moment. But like I said earlier, it just reminds you of how we're supposed to be. And sometimes how we're supposed to be, that's tough. And you need to have shows like this to kind of show us the right path or to help us get back on the path. So thank you for this show, because I think it's so funny, but also has so many amazing qualities to it.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for talking to me about it. We're very proud of it, and now it's going to be a great season. And we're even doing a Christmas edition, so you can imagine how that's going to be.
Are you going to ruin Santa Claus for kids? Is this way when kids find out that Santa Claus isn't real?
No, we would never do that. But what would you do if you're at a Christmas tree orchard place where you're buying Christmas trees, and people are spending hundreds of dollars on tall trees, but in comes this poor family who can only afford the Charlie Brown little twiggy tree for $20? You would be amazed at how people step in to buy the tree for strangers because they feel that the spirit of the holiday is so important. It touched them so much. It's great.
This is what we need right now. This show, especially in this election cycle. Go
Yeah.
watch this show. I think it'll remind you of everything that you need to be reminded of. I could talk to you forever. You truly are a legend. I look up to you, and thank you for all of this time with me and my audience today. You guys, the show is What Would You Do? 17 seasons in. You can watch it ABC Mondays, then on Hulu the next day. I'm telling you, you can watch this show with your family. Mr. Quiñones, I hope I get the opportunity to speak to you again somewhere down the line.
Yes, and I hope we meet in person. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.